So let's talk about the Red Cross. Here was part of their explanation today about why not all of that money that they've got, $115 million for bushfire fighting or bushfire victims, won't get there now.
We know that we're only halfway through the bushfire season, so if we had a bushfire next month, we would want to be able to support those communities. So we've always said for our Disaster Relief and Recovery Fund, it's used to support Australian disasters that happened this year, which of course is bushfires this year, that we're all focused on. And we know that, we've got halfway through the bushfire season, so fingers crossed, but we know that there's a high risk of more people impacted.
By the way, the administrative costs of the Red Cross in Australia last year was $37 million. 10% of the $115 million is what is going to be kept for administration to pay for, among other things, telemarketing, Chris.
Yeah, it's a worry, and I think a lot of people were very, very disappointed when they hear about this. But to a small degree, Paul, just a small degree, I feel a bit sorry for Red Cross on this. I mean, they have been overwhelmed by donations. Now, of course, Australians are incredibly generous. There's been a lot of support in the community for people hit by bushfires. But the reason that the donations are astronomical in this disaster is partly because of the whole climate hysteria, taking it overseas. You've got actors and actresses and business people all feeling they've got to stump in as a climate gesture. So they've ended up with far more money than you ordinarily would have for a disaster like this. So I think that the important thing is transparency. Absolutely minimise those administration costs, but be absolutely transparent where every other dollar is spent.
Bronwyn, is my hard heart failing me?
Well, no, because what you're doing, Paul, is looking at the annual report already published, and that's what had been the modus operandi. Now, the point that Chris makes about additional money coming in is a valid one. But the statement that came out that they were going to keep something like a third of it for future disasters was just unconscionable.
Yeah, and that came from them, by the way. Nobody was fitting them up. That came from them.
That came from them, and it did remind me of some of the money that was donated when Indonesia had the tsunami, and there was a similar hiccup. But I am pleased that they came out and said, OK, it's not going to be that way. It's going to go to the people straight away, because that's what they needed now. And that's why people gave the money. I
felt a little better after, look, I would have preferred if the Red Cross was here, but of course they've got no interest in turning up to get the straight questions. Instead, today on the Today Show, the boss was trying to explain that, yes, it is, when we say future, we mean future for the bushfire people, but hang on, that's not what you said, and that's why we all said what we said in the past 24 hours. So if nothing else, if the noise has helped them clarify, then I suppose the needle has moved somewhere. Nicholas, look, $13 million last year being spent on telemarketing. That is ludicrous for an organisation that gets a very big chunk of change from people because they are historically used to giving to them.
Yeah, I mean, look, I think you're right to put scrutiny on the organisations. We're talking about very large sums of public money being donated here, and so it needs to be scrutinised. But look, I would say broadly, I think we're pretty well served in this country by our major charities, whether that's the Red Cross, the Salvation Army, or St Vincent's, where my dear dad's a volunteer. I mean, I think they all do a pretty good job. I see the Red Cross today have come out and said that less than 10% of the funding that's donated goes into administration costs. That seems to be reasonable with me, given the complexity and the difficulty of the task that they're trying to do in terms of getting that money in, make sure they're complying with the laws and regulations, and then make sure they're getting it out to the right people as well.
Like $11 million to help people?
Well, you want to make sure that you're not giving out money to people who, I don't know, haven't been affected by the bushfires. It's going to the people who actually need it. So they've got to have administration and scrutiny there in place.
What about telemarketing?
Telemarketing stuff that you raised, yeah, look, I mean, that I'd want to know more about that. I mean, it's legitimate for an organisation, I think, to engage in marketing to try and collect donations. I think all charities do that in one form or another, so I'd want to know more about that.
Well, I think it's actually something that frustrates a lot of Australians, which is the corporatisation of charity, that you expect that when somebody comes and says, hey, would you like to give to, they're a member of the association or they believe in it. But we all know that either because of charity fatigue or something else, there's money to be made somewhere for an organisation to, I mean, this is cream being taken off the cream being taken off the cream. At some point, that's cream that should be being resent back into the cake, right?
Yeah, but let me say, as a local member, If I had need to find money for someone who is in desperate need, I would go to the Salvation Army. And for that reason, I continue to this day to work on their Red Shield appeal and to donate to them. Because I feel that they will give help as it's needed. Now, it does cost money to administer and to run things, but that's why you're always looking at those annual reports to see what percentage is used and so on. So I hate to say it, Nicholas, but you actually had a bit of a point there.
Oh, hang on. We're starting the year with this. A unity ticket.
Bloody off to a great start.
It is.
So we'll see if you can keep it up, Nicholas, because it just might be that you're taking all that advice I've been giving you. Giving up your socialism? You're really a nice guy.
He's getting older. He might be getting older and wiser. I think there's a bit of donor beware here. Some charities are better than others. You got to look at how your money's been spent. You know, I love charities where you can say, I'm donating this money and it's paying for the education of that child.
Correct.
And you've got that sort of directness. But it reminds me of a story I once did as a young TV journo in Adelaide many moons ago. And I focused on one of these charities, and you should check them all out, especially if you're putting in a significant amount of money. But this was one of those charities that was spending so much on telemarketing, or the sort of more than 50% of your dollar donation was going into those sorts of schemes. And I did this story excoriating the mob, and they wouldn't give me an interview and a picture of the general manager from the annual report. And then I turned up at my kid's footy match on the weekend, and he was standing alongside me. The kids were on the same team.
Yeah, I have that experience every time I go to Canberra. It's always fun when I'm going through the Senate doors and Kenny Wong looks and goes, you?
Not to mention the press gallery.
Oh, isn't that a fun walk? Isn't that a fun walk when they look and see that fat bloke's eating chips? Can I link that to the Guardian? How do I dob that one in?
It's like running the Bulls.
But there is a bigger bit here, right? $500 million has been raised overall in this area. Jeff Kennett yesterday came out, because he's managing some funds for the BCA, saying that, look, there's frankly too many cooks in the kitchen. So what is the solution there? Because, look, again, I don't want to throw clipboards at it, but I also don't want to see well-meaning people starting up things, those online sites that sort of take 5% here and 2% there and 10% there. People don't expect that to still be trickling out 2 years from now.
Well, the one thing we don't want is more government regulation. We really seriously don't.
Sure.
I think you've got more chance of getting money out the door without having to fill out a 100-page form, which government will require, through the charities.
I don't government can do admin at 10%. But Nicholas would be interesting on this, because he's involved in that Movember charity.
Yeah.
The thing is, I mean, you have, they're all great charities. Don't get me wrong, but we have like the Cancer Council, then we have the Breast Cancer Organisation.
How is it not just a cancer bucket?
Then we have ovarian cancer. Then we have,
No, I'm going to disagree with both of you on that.
Oh.
The more you have competition's good in the charitable sector as well. So if you've got one particular organisation that is attracting the really best brains in and they're really competing for the best, you get a better outcome. The community chest idea always gets less, and you dumb it down again.
Nicholas, you get the last say on this. That's the only time I'll say that this year.
I'm feeling so simpatico with Chris and Bronwyn tonight, because I was going to agree with them about their point on red tape in the charity sector. So, I am on the board of Movember, and I can tell you it is extremely onerous. Like, every charity in Australia has to spend a lot of money on legal fees because there is just so much compliance involved. Now, I know that's an important part of people being able to have confidence in the system, and therefore hopefully that encourages them to donate more. But, it should be fit for purpose, and I think sometimes in this sector it can go too far. The big and serious point I do want to make, though, Paul, is that Australians have been extremely generous around the bushfires, and Chris's point's absolutely right. People should do their homework, but they should keep donating as well. Like, there's a lot of people in a lot of trouble, and Aussies should keep giving. And, we're all in this together, and we want to help those devastated communities get through this.
I agree, but seriously, $500 million is there now. That's one hell of a good start. That gets you, I think, way closer to the finish line than some may have been thinking.